You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the business and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk with Tera Eddleman about embezzlement, fraud, and theft in veterinary practices. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Grice, business consultant and former equine practice owner. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2024 by CareCredit. Tera Eddleman, CVA, also known as Certified Valuation Analyst, has deep roots in all financial aspects of veterinary practice management. Since 2010, she has served as a financial manager and accounting consultant for many different types and sizes of veterinary practices across the country. She is an accounting consultant and valuation analyst at Summit Veterinary Advisors, a firm that specializes in meeting the financial consulting needs of both general and specialty veterinary practices. Tera started her accounting career as a staff accountant and auditor for a local CPA firm. From there, she was a cost accountant for a large publicly traded company, managing international accounts. After 5 years in corporate America, she found her home in the veterinary industry as controller for equine sports medicine and surgery in Weatherford, Texas, and later as the director of accounting and finance for Innova Partners. Tera started working for Summit Veterinary Advisors in 2018 and was given the opportunity to purchase the business in 2022. Tera has a BBA in accounting from Tarleton State University. She's a certified valuation analyst and co-chair of the Vet Partners Valuation Council. She is also a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor. Tera speaks nationally on monitoring critical financial measures, fraud prevention, and understanding practice value, and has passion for making a difference in people's lives through helping them better understand and manage the business facets of their practices. Welcome, Tera. I'm so glad you're with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Grice. I'm excited to be here.
You know, most equine veterinarians that I talk to have no idea how common fraud and embezzlement is in our industry. They just don't understand the most common ways that employees can commit fraud, theft, and embezzlement. Can you tell us about that? And what are the telltale signs that people should look for?
Sure. Unfortunately, it is. It's very common. And there's many statistics out there that would scare you to death. But some of the areas that are most susceptible, and, not sure how much time we want a lot of this because there is a lot that we could go through. But a lot of practices don't reconcile their practice management system with their books or their bank. That is probably the main area that I see fraud ways that practices, are susceptible. Let's see some other areas: falsifying or deleting invoices for clients, especially if the client pays in cash. Same thing with vendors, falsifying or adding bills from a vendor, creating fictitious vendors. Another big area that practices are susceptible at is company credit cards, misuse of them, buying personal things with them, refusal to submit receipts or explain charges. Inventory is a whole nother can of worms, but it's a huge area, for people to get an easy 5-finger discount, we say. Payroll's another big area, with employees inflating hours, practice managers giving themselves bonuses that the owners just don't see or are not managing. If an employee has complete access to everything, making banking transfers, signing checks, things like that, those are the most susceptible areas, or common things that we see.
Yeah, and there are a lot of them, aren't there? I love when you were saying the easy five finger discount. That's a good one. Yeah. So what can practice owners do to protect themselves? Because, most veterinarians have, especially in the equine industry, um, they're very small. I mean, over half are 1 to 2 full equivalent doctors. And the staff ratio in our most recent equine report through the AVMA, was like 1 to 1. I mean, like there's not a lot of people. And
Right.
so what can practice owners do?
So, internal controls and segregation of duties are the key to prevent any kind of wrongdoing. Like you said, some practices don't have um, that ability to do that. But if at all possible, don't have one person doing it all. Nobody should have the keys to the castle, so to speak. Only owners of the practice should have check signing authority or online banking authority to make online transfers. Do not have a stamp. Unfortunately, I still see a lot of practices with the owner's signature stamp locked in a drawer. Um, let's see, make sure someone else is reconciling the bank statements for someone different that's also putting in the transaction. Talked about company credit cards earlier. Limit those as best you can. Give it out very cautiously to only people with really important responsibilities and that are capable of doing that. In hospital settings, clinic settings, cameras, definitely invest in cameras on the front desk, the pharmacy. Cameras are cheap enough now, definitely worth the investment. Review user roles and permissions in your systems. That's going to be a big one, an important one, to make sure that nobody can delete an invoice if they don't need to, or make any changes that are unauthorized. As an owner, I would say to be as involved as possible. And again, this is kind of with the smaller practices. Even though I tell some clients, even though you don't have time or you don't understand it, act like you do. That
Yeah.
helps, the bookkeeper, the person doing it, to at least think that they're being, watched and have eyes on it. Also, too, I think for the smaller practices, um, honestly, let's see, what am I trying to say? Lead by example, meaning if you're practicing ethical and positive behavior, your employees will too. Especially, like I said, the practices with the smaller employees and more like family practices, just like your kids, they're going to follow your example. So lead by, ethical and positive behavior. I know it sounds kind of different, but I've seen that firsthand really work with a lot of smaller practices. It usually takes about 12 to 18 months for fraud to be detected. So another recommendation that I would have is to have your books looked at by another financial mind, like your CPA or another accountant in the industry, pretty frequently, once a year, semi-annual, just to have another set of eyes to see if there's anything that's out of line or any blaring signs or red flags. Again, doing that also helps, is more of a preventative measure too, for bookkeepers to know that another set of eyes are watching over what they're doing. So, and
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah. Excellent advice. My God.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By helping to bridge the gap between costs and care, CareCredit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. Clients have a flexible way to pay over time for all types of care, and practices get paid in 2 business days. It's a payment experience everyone can feel good about.
So when you were saying about only owners should sign checks, I can remember, when the stack of checks would hit my desk as 4 partners, we each had to take our turn signing our name many, many times.
Uh-huh.
So they always had information about what the check was about. And so, what are the things that should accompany any check that an owner's going to sign?
Sure, that's a great question. Support of the actual invoice, a copy of it, whether that's a physical one or electronic one. I know a lot of practices these days are going the electronic route with bill pay systems like within QuickBooks or Bill.com, which automatically do have the documentation attached. But you need to look at the vendor name, the amount, dates. Make sure that they're normal, that they're recognizable, that they're not, if anything makes you scratch your head and say, wait a minute, who is this vendor or what is this? Ask questions. Don't just say, oh, whatever, because you're in a hurry and go on. Because usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And if there's something that makes you, squint your eyebrows or scratch your head, pay attention to it, especially if it seems to happen very regularly. So yeah, just as much support from the actual invoice and bill statements as possible with the check.
What about credit cards? Or I know, like, I'm on the town council where I live, and we get, we're doing all of this financial stuff, and that we have to approve every month at the meeting. And one of the things that I've asked for is with the debit card, because usually we just see these amounts. And I said, so I would really like to know what each of these debit transactions was for.
Absolutely.
But credit cards, same way. So how do you, like, as a business owner, I mean, I can remember one of my VMG members having a horrible thing happen with a credit card with an employee. And so what behooves a practice owner with the whole credit card or debit card thing? What do you do?
Well, again, especially, for busy equine practitioners or ambulatory guys out, out and about, we usually recommend using apps such as Expensify, again, Bill.com, QuickBooks Online even has apps. Right when you make that transaction, take a picture of the receipt that has the itemized detail and information on it. It has what was purchased, the date, the time, and all that, and put it into this app. And it's very handy because, again, all of those sync with your accounting software, and you're not keeping up with thousands of receipts in your glove box or in your wallet or whatever. And submitting those immediately, and then requiring that of your employees too. And again, if you can do it, your employees will do it. And so just encourage as much as you can, an easiest, quickest way. And if somebody's not technologically savvy or whatever, they can just take a picture with their phone and email it, or turn in, again, the hard receipts. But in the event of an audit as well, those are going to come in handy to not only protect you from fraud, but also in the event of an audit from the IRS when they go questioning what all those debit transactions were from your bank account.
Right. And I'm so glad you said, the people that aren't good with technology, because I can think of, my older partners back when I was at Rhinebeck that, they would have been like, what? I do what? Right. So
yeah.
what are the names of a couple of those apps, just for our listeners so that they would remember them?
Sure. Off the top of my head, it's Expensify, Bill.com. And then QuickBooks Online also has a module within this software that I believe that, you can give each employee an email address to email that to, and it'll go directly into an inbox type thing within QuickBooks. Those are the top three that we usually see and use with clients.
That is really, really helpful. That's really helpful.
Very helpful too as well.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to have, like, I come home from a business trip, a work trip, and I have like a stack of receipts that I put on my desk. Yeah. I could show you them now, but
I try to always do, because a lot of times they don't make it home in the rain.
I share that. So I might have to try this. That would be kind of cool to not have to keep track of them, for sure. So when, we've been talking about small practices and these kind of internal controls. So the best practices a lot of times just can't happen. There's just not enough people. what operation should people prioritize? You had such a great list here. When you talk about the solo practitioner who is just already super, super busy, what are maybe the top one or two or even three things that they should prioritize and really pay attention to?
That's a good question. Like I said before, honestly, the small, really busy practitioners, what I've seen most effective is asking a lot of questions and pretending you don't know, even if you don't know, just making that effort, that visual effort to your employees that, hey, I am interested in the books. Hey, I do want to know what's going on. I am busy, but I am still watching. And again, too, I think it is important to have another set of eyes on it as frequently as you can. And then be vigilant. That's the biggest thing. You definitely want to trust your employees, but be cautious of anything, like I said earlier, that makes you scratch your head or go, pay attention. And even though you are busy, it is worth to stop and take the time to investigate and check a few things out. That doesn't.
Yeah, that actually brings to mind something that happened this past year, where I heard from a Decade One member that they had just hired somebody for their front office, and it seemed like that person was going to really fit in, and everybody liked her. They had it was a husband-wife team, and they had a couple of new person in the office, and one of their veterinary assistants wanted to be her friend, this new person's friend on Facebook. So she was kind of looking her up and discovered that she had actually embezzled, 50-something $1,000 from her local volunteer fire department.
Oh, no.
And so another thing that people should probably do is actually be careful when they hire. There's services that will do a background check, right?
Absolutely. Yes. That are very cheap and affordable. Absolutely. That's another great point I had on my list. I didn't catch. Be extremely diligent in hiring. Hire slow, fire fast. I always hear people, and that's the truth. Anything that comes on a background check that's concerning, ask questions, but definitely anything to do with financial situation, hot checks, fraud, of course, anything like that. Definitely be diligent in screening employees, background checks, Facebook stalking, anything. As much information as possible, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, because, most people, when they're in this situation, do not prosecute. I mean, they don't. And so, it's hard that the person sometimes just goes on to the next willing victim.
Yes, unfortunately, that is. And in cases, we've been involved in the past, we do coach them that, because a lot of times, unfortunately, it's legacy employees or even family members, Amy, that so there's no prosecution, and we coach them and say, hey, it's not that you're out to ruin them, but you can help protect somebody else by, pressing charges or putting in some kind of measures to get this person the help that they need to not do that again and be able to, to hurt somebody else.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking when this happens. So, yeah, you definitely don't want to experience it. That's for sure.
Right.
So, if a practice owner suspects that something's going on, and in fact, I just saw a Facebook post the other day on a veterinary site where they said, we're really, really busy, and our prices, I think, are correct, but we don't have any money. I'm worried about meeting payroll. So if they're suspecting, I mean, that's one of the ways you might suspect. But what should they do?
That is definitely, that's one of the tall tales you mentioned earlier. Yeah, that is when there's they're busy, the calendar is full, they've got profit, but there's no cash. That is definitely a telltale sign. If that's the case, again, don't ignore it. That's the worst thing you could do. Be discreet about your suspicions. Don't tell, any of the other employees. Do the best you can in finding out, specifically what the deal is. If it's something like your example you mentioned where you're profitable, you've got clients booking, but you don't have cash. In that example, I would definitely recommend hiring a consultant or an accounting expert to come in, especially somebody that knows the veterinary practice ins and outs, that they can quickly know where to look, especially with the different softwares that we use in veterinary practices with the practice management system. Come in, take a look, get their professional opinion. And once you get the proof you need, formulate a plan. Make sure that you've got all the options and bases covered. And that might include, like we talked about earlier, that might include speaking with law enforcement and pressing charges, but get kind of plan A, B, C, and D and all the things, and then present that proof. Confront the employee with what you have found. I would definitely recommend having at least 1 or 2 eyewitnesses when you do confront them, preferably the professionals that help you found it. That way they can help explain it. Preferably also not fellow employees or anybody else that the person, the bookkeeper, is friends with, because most of the time they're more likely to cooperate and even confess if there's professionals in the room that they can't argue with. And so depending on either way, how the employee responds, immediately remove them from their job responsibilities, any company possessions, keys, computers, credit cards. And if they're in a clinic or a hospital, escort them out the door. If they're, in their truck, get them away from the vehicle. And it may be peaceful, it may not be. If you feel like the person could potentially get violent or dangerous, definitely just call the local sheriff's office just to have, just another peace officer there just to prevent anything that's happening. But also if it's gone to that level too, and you've got the proof and or they've confessed, check your insurance policies, because a lot of times insurance policies will cover that. So that's something too to be sure and take a look at if you are experiencing that. And even if you're not, it's worth calling your insurance broker and just seeing how much a policy would cost, because like you said, unfortunately, it's so common in the veterinary industry today.
What is that kind of coverage called? Does it have a special name?
That's a great question. I don't know it off the top of my head, but your broker will. Just, embezzlement, fraud, and theft. And I'm sure there's all different kinds of policies and types, especially with a veterinary practice having controlled drugs on site and things like that. So I'm not sure off the top of my head. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Is there a particular case that you remember that provides any lessons to people?
Oh,
Because you do this for people, as I recall.
I used to, Amy, we don't do a whole lot anymore.
Okay.
We've gotten more busy with valuations, honestly. So I don't do a whole lot anymore. But we do work with a couple other firms that we send them out to. But back when I was doing it a lot, there was several. I think the most common theme throughout the cases that I worked with, honestly, was the hardest part was they were legacy employees or like family, if not actual family members. And the saddest thing I saw was owners making excuses or sticking their head in the sand or just not really wanting to believe it. And then it going on so long, it was crippling, truly crippling to the practice, to the point, cash was so low, they would had even considered shutting their doors. So I think some good lessons to learn from that is, you always want to trust your employee, definitely want to trust your employees, but stay vigilant and be aware that it could happen to you. they let it go on so long because they made excuses and they didn't want to believe that it could happen to them, or that that person would be capable of something like that, or would even do something like that to them, to the point where it would cripple the practice. So I think that would be the biggest lesson that I would say is from past experiences, is just you want to trust your employees, but verify. And then when you do see or feel, you'll know. Don't ignore it. Take action to at least just stop the bleeding, if not, pressing charges like we talked about earlier.
Do most accountants have access to a firm that could help somebody? So, like, if somebody's in this position, how do they find the people to help them?
No, that's a great question. Most CPA firms do. Either they will have somebody on staff with some forensic or auditing, skills and experience, or they will know somebody who does. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a veterinarian specific accounting firm. Now, again, it is easier because they do know the ins and outs and how the cash should flow from all the software and from the front desk and, all the way to the owner's pocket and distribution. So it's a little bit easier, but any accounting mind should be able to have somebody, to refer you to, or to know a basics, general test to do. Yes. Great question.
I do remember you telling us years ago that it was important for veterinary owners to know that your regular accountant who is, doing your taxes and things like that, they're not going to be the one that comes to you and says, hey, by the way.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to understand that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So your tax preparer is just getting your numbers from your books and plugging it into software most of the time. And a lot of times it's tax season and it's just like herding cattle, right? In and out the tax returns. They're not necessarily looking for it. Now, if things do jump out, if they are able to reconcile the books or something just looks weird and out of the ordinary, they could potentially, but you're absolutely right. Having somebody look at the books strictly from a perspective of, is everything in the right place? Does everything look right? Are the bank accounts reconciling okay? Are the credit card statements reconciling okay? You'd be surprised, Amy, at how many practices don't even reconcile the credit card statements. They're never even looking at it. Like, for example, I did have a case that the practice manager was using her credit card for all kinds of personal stuff. And the owner was never looking at the credit card statement. They were just looking in QuickBooks. And in QuickBooks, the practice manager had written, a drug vendor's name under that charge. And so QuickBooks looked fine, but nobody ever was looking at the actual credit card statement with, Victoria's Secret or Party City for something.
Right.
That would have jumped out at somebody of, why is this on a veterinary practice's credit card statement? So yeah, just being vigilant in that way. Yeah.
Great information for people, I mean, I think this particular episode is really going to help a lot of people. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with this. We keep saying that, everybody sticks their head in the sand or just looks the other way so often, or doesn't slow down and take the time. But I think it really is, it's a huge responsibility for a practice owner to be vigilant, to protect their investment in the business, and if they want to be able to continue to practice quality medicine and be there for your clients, it's a huge responsibility. And I don't want, this to cause any unnecessary anxiety or freak anybody out, So I always just say you want to be able to trust your employees, but stay vigilant. I think it was Ronald Reagan that said it best, or he said, trust, but verify. And it's not paranoia, it's prudence. It's being responsible. So yeah, just don't ignore it and take action as soon as you can.
Great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tera, and thank you all for listening to the Business of Practice podcast, and a big thanks to our sponsor, CareCredit. And to all my listeners out there, be brave, embrace change.